everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Jessica Henry Gray and I am so happy to have you with me today. Today I have a special treat. I am going to take you with me a little bit on my honeymoon. My husband and I went to Falling Water in Pennsylvania. It's the 1930s house built by Frank Loyd Wright. So we are going to visit this, and I can't take you inside the house with me, but because they didn't allow photography, but I will take you and show you how to paint this painting, and I'm going to focus on a lot of the greens as well as getting the drawing of the architecture accurate and getting those angles and perspective spot on. Okay, so I also wanted to remind you to check out the links below to all of our new Giclee prints. Many of these prints are YouTube videos, so if you've enjoyed these videos and you'd like to support our channel, I would encourage you to go to my website and check out the new Giclee prints. All the links for those are below. All right, so let's jump in and I'll show you how to paint this. I have a 9 by 12 canvas here behind me, and I will show you the colors that I'm going to be using today. So on my palette here, I have some extra colors out that I am using on another painting, and I may use them today. So I will just run everything by you on my palette, and if I use them or not, I will tell you in the course of this painting. Okay, so I'm starting with titanium white. I have Naples yellow, cadmium yellow medium, cadmium red light, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, burnt sienna, Indian red, ultramarine blue, and then I have magenta, alizarin crimson, quinacridone violet, which I won't be using either magenta or the violet, phthalo green, and I do have a little bit of burnt umber out for just darkening some of the shadows that I'm working on in my other painting, and I may use that in this one as well. All right, so I am going to work on this painting, and I'm going to talk to you while I'm working on it. And the focus of this study will be on greens. So we're going to get a lot of how to mix different shades of greens. As you can see from the images that I've shown you, there are a million different shades in this actual image. So let's jump in and we'll get going, and we're going to paint Falling Water. All right. All right, so this is just a pre-stretched cotton canvas, but it has a really fine weave, and I really like it, so I'm excited to work on this today. For my regular materials, I have linseed oil in this cup and my little canister of odorless mineral spirits, which I keep a cap on. And if you'll hear an extra sound in my studio today, I have a new ventilation system in the studio that I have on while I'm painting. So that's going to be running. So I have my paper towel, and I'm going to start out with just a tone over this canvas, just a very light odorless mineral spirits and burnt sienna mixture. Now, one thing that you will typically not ever hear me say on these YouTube videos is whether or not this project is geared for beginner, intermediate, or advanced. And part of that reason is because I believe that anyone can do whatever they set their mind to. So whatever your challenges are, if you want to paint people or landscapes, whatever the case, I believe whatever you set your mind to, you can do. It's just a matter of time. So I don't try to qualify my videos as whether they're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, because you can do this. If I can do it, you can too. That's one of my favorite sayings in life, is if someone else can do it, you can do it too. So again, I'm just starting with a tone over this canvas. I think I might be getting some of that Indian red and some Indian yellow into this burnt sienna mixture, but that's all right. You don't have to use these colors in whatever it is you're doing. I happen to like a slightly reddish tone on my canvas because it makes my greens seem to pop even more. And I wipe most of this off anyway. So it just gives me a nice place to start. And some people find working on a white canvas to be somewhat intimidating. If that's your bent, then by all means, try putting a tone over it and see if that might make you feel a little better. So I rough it up a little bit because I don't like that freshly wiped out look. Just give it a little bit of texture. It kind of makes it look a little bit like suede, and I think that's kind of fun. All right, so here we go. Let's jump in. I like that color for the tone here on my canvas because it's very close to the color that the house itself is. Now, I can't share this picture with you, but you are welcome to practice and study these different techniques on whatever it is you're working on at home. And you can always go to the internet and find pictures of, this is one of the most photographed houses in America. The house itself was built in 1930s by Frank Loyd Wright, and it was an architectural phenomenon at the time, and it still remains to be just this beautiful icon of his example of his houses. All right, so now my first challenge here before I begin with anything else is to figure out where it's going to go in here and how much time and space and placement I want to give it. So if I make the house this important and the waterfalls are kind of in here and the rocks about here and that final section of the waterfall, I'm looking at the distance from this piece of waterfall to this piece, trying to get that distance accurate. So right in there. So I'll put some rocks down here, some rocks up in here, a big rock here, and then this will all be foliage in here. You can see I'm just holding my brush very, very loosely just to give myself a sense of, okay, we're gonna live in this area here. And I'm not really committed to this at this time. I could always easily just wipe that out. I've literally spent seconds just figuring out, is that a nice thing right about there? If I was out in nature and gonna be doing this as a plein air experience, I would be doing this on a thumbnail sketch. Exactly this same very loose idea. So I like that, and I think that the chimney kind of can come up this way. So the remainder of the architectural design will be in here. So at this point, I'm starting to examine some of the angles, and if the bottom of that lower balcony goes at about that angle, it's very subtle. You can even put a straight edge on your image if you're doing a structure. Do a straight edge and then check at what that angle is. I always say it's like the alligator mouth. How far open is it? I taught children for 14 years, so I always go to the simplistic definition. So if I go, again, straight horizontal line on my canvas, is that angle about the same? You can always check it, you know, with a compass if you so choose. I don't. I'm gonna pretend like I'm out in nature, and I'm gonna do this, and I'll compare it this way. We're pretty much on point there. So I've got a darker shadow in here that is important, that gives the whole painting a nice contrast right in the middle. Our eye is always drawn to the area of the greatest contrast in any painting, drawing, whatever. So wherever you put the strongest black and white, your eye is gonna go right there. And so be cautious of that when you're working on anything. If you keep putting a lot of contrast over towards the edges, your eye's going to go right there and off the canvas. Compositionally, it's not a good thing. You don't want to do that. So keep the viewer in the areas where you want us to look, and use that contrast, our eye being drawn to contrast, use that as a compositional help. Allow it to guide the viewer throughout the painting. As you get moving, you know, that will be something you need to use. Like here, I've got a little bit of a contrast I'll incorporate with these rocks down below. It won't be super strong, but it will be there. And then I'll bring the eye up this way. We've got this dark shadow under the rock right here. And then coming up under the house, we've got this lower balcony, or under the balcony right here, creating that nice shadow. And the reason that I put these dots here and here is because as our eye travels up this design here, there's a dark spot here and a dark spot here and a little dark spot up by the chimney. And so that kind of helps guide the eye. You can see there really isn't anything of a strong contrast on this side. So here I have my composition. All right, so when I'm content with the size and placement, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop filming. I'll put it in fast forward and you can see how I will finish laying in the design and detail of the rest of this drawing. Okay, now that I have the drawing pretty much in place, I'm going to start from the center and work my way out. The building is pretty close to where I want it. I'm just going to take a small brush, just these cheapy ones, and begin by laying in some of the color that I want in here. I'm starting with this because I want to work the background in and around it while I'm painting on it. So I'm going to start with some yellow ochre because that seems to be the predominant color that I see in it. Let's get a good pile of that. Some titanium white. And I'm going to start with the brightest light on here because I already have my shadows in place. Might even take a little bit of cadmium yellow and some white. I'm going to try to stick to the standard palette that I normally use in my videos, but if I venture out, I will tell you the new color that I'm using. Okay, so I have some white and yellow going here, maybe a little bit brighter because I really do want that value impact right here to be the most predominant. I'm also going to cover my odorless mineral spirits so that I don't breathe that in any more than I have to, even though I have ventilation on. If I need to clean my brush, I'll just take the lid off and it makes things a little more bearable if the fumes bother you while painting. I'm using a little bit of linseed oil to thin my paint today. And sometimes when you're dealing with these strong, crisp lines in architecture, you really want a clean, sharp edge. So using a little bit of more medium helps you achieve that clean, sharp edge. But I don't want that everywhere, only in a few places where I need the value to be brightest. So I'll lose some edges and soften edges as I go throughout. So that's going to be my brightest light on the whole structure here. So taking it down just a notch, a little bit more of the yellow in there, and some medium. Keeping my paint a little bit thinner than I normally do. Makes it a little easier. I'm looking around other places to where I see the same color and value. And so that's all I'm laying in at this point. Wherever I see the same color. I'm going to add just the smallest touch of burnt sienna as my balcony starts to go back. which is pretty much the color that my canvas is underneath, that white with the burnt sienna. A little bit of yellow. Now, as you saw when I was showing you this and fast forward the drawing, I lifted out the lighter values off of the canvas with a little bit of thinner on the tip of my brush. And what you couldn't see was how often I was wiping my brush off on my paper towel. By continually wiping or adding thinner will determine how much pigment you get up off your canvas. If you wipe hard on your brush, if you clean it really hard, you'll get a lot more of the thinner off your bristles and you won't lift out as much paint. If you don't wipe your brush very well, you'll have more thinner in the bristles and you'll be able to wipe out more pigment. And so you'll get down to the canvas a brighter white. And then as we slip into this shadow where the overhanging balcony from above casts a shadow on this balcony below, there's a greenish tint to where it's picking up bounce light from the surrounding trees. So we're going to put a little bit of that on there. And you see I'm resting my pinky on the edge of my canvas. If you don't want to do that because you have maybe wet paint down there or whatever, you can use either a mahl stick or another paintbrush to rest your hand on. So I'm doing the underside of this balcony, and it's getting a lot more of the green that's from the earth coming up under here, hitting that. All right, now I'm gonna work inside the windows here, and I'm gonna do that in slightly fast forwarded. Okay, now I'm going to work on the chimney a little bit in here. Just taking some of that ultramarine blue and burnt sienna that I have here. And I'm going to add some more white to that to create that very light gray. But I'm going to start with a little bit darker shade where I see a slight value shift. A little yellow ochre into that will make them appear like they are getting a little bit of weathering from being out in nature. Kind of warms them up a little more white to that. It's too heavy. And some linseed oil. And then where this is underneath more, I am seeing quite a bit more yellow ochre down here. Especially as it's closer to the water. Slightly darker in front of the chimney stack here. Just a slight bit shift in value. a little more than slight. I'm working now on softening and sharpening specific edges, cleaning up any fuzzy passages just right around the balcony up here. Because before I move on, I want to make sure that this is all where it needs to be. Okay, so now I'm taking some Indian red right here, and I'm going to mix a little bit of white in with that. And I'm going to try to paint these corner pieces here where the windows come together in this passage right here. Just going to paint most of it this Indian red color, and then I'll come back through with little dark dots for windows. And this can really just be suggested. It doesn't, as I'm working on this, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get all that? So you can if you happen to be doing this same painting, you can suggest too, or whatever it is you're working on. Sometimes a lot of extra detail is just non-essential. This happens to be a very identifying feature to the house, and this color actually too, the sort of that Indian red is very significant. A little bit more focus work done here on the under the balcony, and that's pretty much just some light hitting these rocks underneath it here. Okay, now I'm going to focus on some of the greens before I get down into the waterfall. So the greens just right around the house are very bright, which is great because I want to keep the focus right in that area. So I'm going to take some cadmium yellow, and I'm going to mix up a few different shades of green down here, and you'll see what I have mixed, and then I'll be jumping back into them as throughout the course of painting the foliage. So taking some ultramarine blue and yellow ochre, or excuse me, cad yellow, I'm just going to paint those two together. And by painting them together, you can see that part of this pile is bright green and very yellowy. There's some white underneath there, but not very much. And then over here, I have more blue into this green. So by adding a little bit of linseed oil, I can stretch that a little further. So now I have that spectrum. I'm going to take a little bit of phthalo green, which I have way over here, and I'm going to take some more of this yellow. And by mixing those together in the same sort of spectrum, I get an even brighter, springier green. Let's get some more of that yellow. Okay. Now, to get a little bit more duller, neutral shade of green, I'm going to take some ultramarine blue and some yellow ochre and paint those two colors together. More ochre gives me a little bit more of an olive green. Now I can add white to these to add some variation, cool it down. I'm gonna try, let's take some Indian yellow. It's a color I don't use very often, but we'll mix it with some ultramarine blue and paint those colors together. And that gives us a very nice olive green color in there. Okay, now as we go along and I start to get some of these pines, I'm going to take right into this gray mixture some ultramarine blue, and I'll take some of this yellow ochre and a very little bit of yellow ochre, but mixed with that white gray that was underneath. Gives me a really nice pine color. And you can see that in here. Now a lot of green has some reds in it. Burnt sienna is part of the red family. So let's go down here and I'll take some ultramarine blue. Let's take some cad yellow just to make that point. So I'll mix up a nice green over here and take a little bit of burnt sienna. And that gives me a little bit more earthy tone green. Okay. So now I'm going to just jump into these as I go along. Oh, let's take a little bit of Naples yellow. I'll show you how that can work to your advantage. So let's take some Naples yellow and let's do two different piles. We'll do one with ultramarine blue. And that gives you that Naples yellow is almost white. Okay, now we're going to take some, let me clean my brush off, phthalo green. Let's see what happens if we mix Naples yellow with phthalo green. Okay, that gives you kind of a light mint with just a touch of warmth that you get from the yellow, the Naples yellow. Now if I want to make that a little bit more earthy friendly, I might take, you know, just a touch of burnt sienna and put some here. And that tones it down a little bit, gives you a really nice sage. Okay. So I noticed up in here, because when we went to the Falling Waters, it was getting to be end of September, early October. So way back in the distance here, there's a lot more cooler tone and some warms. Burnt sienna, but I don't want to add too much yellow ochre to the background because it will bring it forward. But if I still want to get some of the yellows and fall colors, I'll want to cool them down. And that's where Naples yellow comes in handy because it's slightly cooler anyway. I can still lighten and keep these greens and warm fall colors way back in the distance, and maybe even add a little bit more white, just to really create that sense of atmosphere. White is a very cool color. It'll cool down anything you add to it. And so I'm looking back at my reference here and I'm seeing different shades of greens representing different trees. And I want to get some of those yellows that I see in the fall colors. So I'm taking some cadmium yellow, mixing it with this burnt sienna that I had right here. Let's take a little bit more of that. I can add a little bit of Naples yellow to cool it down and make it work for my background colors. And there we have a nice fall color. And that is the Indian yellow with the ultramarine blue and a little bit of yellow ochre into it. And by putting a little darker value over the top of this cooler, lighter stuff that I just did kind of pushes that further back and starts to work on bringing it all forward. Let's grab some yellow, Naples yellow into that cadmium yellow up here. As the sunlight is hitting more of this tree, kind of want that to just fade off into sunshine and forest canopy up there. As we scroll down the tree, it starts to get darker. So we'll add a little bit more green down here. A little bit of yellow to that, or red to that green. I think it just helps to neutralize it a little. Bring it down a little off that neon green chart. If you make everything too light and brilliant and bright, it'll all start to look garish. But by muting quite a bit actually, and then saving your brilliance for just the center area, it'll make a little bit more sense and allow those bright colors to sing a little bit more. So some darker green here, little ultramarine blue, burnt sienna, right into that olive green mixture. Oops, linseed oil. I like to alternate some of these bluer, cooler shadows in these trees over here, the ones that are sort of overlapping what's happening in the background there. It makes it feel like cool shadows up close. And I can layer over the top of these too. In here. And you can be a little bit more aggressive with those, because see the value that I have on my underpainting, it's significantly dark. And that, it's not as dark as everything's going to go, but it helps to establish a little bit more anchorage to the whole painting. I'm looking forward to doing this water. That'll be kind of fun. All right, graduating to a little bit lighter green as this foliage changes to deciduous in here. Okay, I just had to cool that down a little bit so that it's still, I needed it further back, a little more further back. I'll jump right into this spring green. I'll put that on some of these bushes in here. Okay, now I'm just going to take some of that bright green that I'd mixed up with the phthalo green and the cad yellow. Be very, very careful with that phthalo green. You don't need very much. Putting in some leaves right here. Looking very carefully at the way that they sort of hang out here, and it's like they're being tossed about by some breeze and wind. Just a little bit. You I'm going to work on the water. Since we focused on green for a little bit in here, I'm going to get some of the water going in here. So the rock under the house, white, some of that Indian red, yellow ochre. You could use burnt sienna, I'm sure it'd be just fine. I know that they really wanted the house to have a feeling as though it came from nature, and so they kept the colors close to the colors that you'd see in nature, which is nice for my palette. I can just jump into the colors that are already existing. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Okay, now the water. I'm going to start with blue, and then I'll paint just white where the water's brightest. Ultramarine blue, some white, chiseled edge on my brush. Now I'm going to come back into there with my, I'll get a little brush for this. A little thinner linseed oil. You roll it to a point, like that. Oh, that a little bit more. Painting water, you want to try to keep the brush strokes in a nice horizontal stroke to really capture that illusion of water and oops, create that smooth as glass feeling, if that's the way it is. There's some yellow, I don't know if that's fallen leaves on the top of these flat rocks, but I'll just put some yellow ochre, just a touch of green in there. right, now to work on greens on the other side. I want to create a little bit more vignette than what is displayed in the photo here. So I'm going to sort of push those darks a little bit more than what I have. Little linseed oil, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre. Let's get a little more oil on there. Get this passage down in here. There's brighter greens in and around these darks, but I want to establish the first layer of this, which is a darker tone. And we'll build on top of that. So now I'm just kind of a little bit more aggressively getting into some of these colors because they're bigger passages, and I want to get a little bit more coverage down. I like this cooler tone of foliage in here. And on top of that, I'll put some brighter, springier greens. But it gives a sense of depth. When I say cool, it always just means something a little on the bluer side, and warmer is on the hot side, orange, yellows, so forth. Now again, I want to be careful not to draw the eye off the canvas by creating too much distraction on this side. A little more yellow ochre as my foliage goes up the tree towards the sun, or cad yellow. Sorry, I meant cadmium yellow. And white. Get some white in there. I'm just going to take some yellow and a little bit of phthalo green linseed oil, some white, so the last thing I want to do is add just a few tree trunks back in here. So I'm going to take some of that whiter off-white color and just suggest a few. All right, you guys, that wraps us up. And I wanted to thank you so much for joining me. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this video, to like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And if you really want to help this channel keep going, check out the links below for my prints. We are getting tremendous reviews from people who've been getting them and enjoying them. They are high quality Giclee prints. So check those out. Many of them, like I said, are YouTube videos. Okay, you guys, I will see you next week. Anyway, I'm here at Falling Waters back there in Pennsylvania. We are on our honeymoon. So just wanted to introduce you to Dean.
Hi.
All right, you guys, I will get back to you later. Bye-bye.